You're listening to Step by Step Stories podcast, the show that helps you handle the ups and downs of daily life with your hosts, Patricia and Manjot. Thanks for joining us today.
This week's question was submitted by Jen. How do we talk to kids about racism?
A lot of us unfortunately find ourselves uncomfortable when it comes to talking about racism. We need to come to a point where we can talk about it as part of everyday dialogue. We need to become comfortable discussing racism, bias, prejudice, discrimination, and hate. We shouldn't have to be prompted by events to talk about it. We're responsible at all times for dismantling systematic racism.
I absolutely agree, Manjot. We need to talk about racism all the time. We need to have open and honest conversations, not just when it's the flavor of the month or the flavor of the year, but we need to do this every single time and always be mindful of it. I think about my own privilege. I am a native English speaker, so I don't have an accent. I've never had to worry about how people perceive me when I speak to them on the phone or when I'm talking to them in person. That's something that I don't really think about very often, but it is such a privilege because it's not based, it's just something that has naturally been given to me and I don't have to really think about it. Whereas when I think about my dad has a very strong accent. And over again, as we were growing up, he used to remind us how he felt that people treated him differently or perceived him to be differently or perceived the way that he worked differently because they heard the accent first before they saw what he was doing.
It's also equally important that before we do engage in conversations about race, that we take time to reflect on our own identities and privileges. By doing so, we can discover just how racialized our own identities and viewpoints have been, and we need to start taking it as an opportunity to confront any stereotypes and misconceptions we've had or continue to have. And conversations around racism need to be honest in order for us to move forward. I find that when I'm having conversations, the best way for me to be honest is to share my own experiences. A lot of times, I tell my students and I tell my friends, as well as my youngest siblings, that as a Canadian born citizen, I haven't been an exception to racism. I've experienced racism ever since I was a small child, and that's mainly due to the fact that I do have a darker complexion. My darker complexion has made me a target so many times, even within my own family, where I've been made fun of. I've had a lot of stereotypes thrown at me. And as a child, I didn't know how to handle that. I wasn't equipped with the knowledge of what racism sounds like, what it feels like, and what to do. And that's why I'm such a strong believer that it doesn't matter how young your child is, we need to have conversations.
You know what, Manjot? It all has to be started with being honest to ourselves. We have to be honest to ourselves, to our kids. Kids need to know what racism is from the time that they are young enough to hear about it and to feel about it. They need to know that everyone is capable of making mistakes, but we're also capable of taking responsibility, and we're also can be, committed to a positive impacting change.
Just going back to Jen's question, when we do talk to kids about racism, we want to be as honest as possible and share our experiences because kids do relate and they do understand and learn from our own experiences and stories. And it's okay to walk away with that conversation. Not having, that full closure because these conversations need to be ongoing at all times. It is also important to note that our actions do speak louder and conversations are very important, but we also need to take time. We need to watch television, online videos about racism, the history of different people, and even checking out books online where we can learn about different ethnicities and understand the diverse society that we live in.
Really, when I think about racism and when the best time is to talk to our children about it, it's any time. It's up to us as parents to try to learn, to do what we can to understand different cultures and to understand ourselves. Kids learn from watching us, from doing with us. And as we try and as we learn together, it's okay. Thanks for joining us. Bye now.